Ladies and gentlemen, hello, my name is Trent Kaniuga, and I want to talk to you about CreeD. Um, Not the band. So if you're into that, you can just click that little knob, another channel, please. I'm going to talk to you about an indie comic book in the 1990s called CreeD. And why do I want to talk about CreeD? Why do I want to talk about this obscure indie comic from the 1990s? Well, if you've been following my channel or if you like my artwork, you might be interested to know that I got my start in comic books when I was 16 years old. I started self-publishing my own indie black and white comic book series, and it was a smashing success. I don't know if it was smashing success. But it was a success for as far as indie comics go. This was in 1992 or 1993, and comic books were my jam. They were my ultimate jam. I eat and breathe comic books and Super Nintendo games in 1992 and 93, and it was all I would do is mow lawns to save up money to buy comics and video games. And so this was kind of like my ultimate goal. This was everything that I ever wanted to do. I couldn't sleep at night because I had to sit down and draw. And I just fantasized about, oh, someday I'm going to have, this was before the internet, so someday I'm going to have like this printed series. And I wanted to do them kind of like manga, but I didn't know what manga was. It was an uncommon thing to have manga in the United States in a small town in the Midwest, you know. I grew up in South Bend or near South Bend, Indiana, if you're curious. And we didn't have a lot of exposure to things like manga and anime. But I wanted to do my books kind of smaller, and nobody wanted that. They all said it was annoying. But I put out my books, so I put out my books normal size on newsprint, and what you're seeing here are pages. I'm not going to go too much into detail. I've got a lot of anecdotes and a lot of stories and a lot of things it was a personal journey that I went through when I was making this stuff. But what's neat about it looking back is that you can see my progression. If you buy this collection, this is a collection of every issue of CreeD that I ever made, put together into one ebook. And it's also available on Amazon if you do a search for it. And that's kind of what this video is about. I've made this available as an ebook. I'm using Gumroad, which is it's a service much like what I use to sell some of my more in-depth videos. So if you have bought any of those, it's the same place. But basically, I wanted to put together a preview and tell you guys what this is even. For a lot of the audience that subscribes to my channel, I think there's a lot of people that are this was a little bit before your time. This was years before you were born in some cases. um, which makes it seem like I'm like an old man, and I've been doing this for a very, very, very long time. But it's sort of true. I mean, I'm like 37 now, but I started doing this when I was 16. So, that was and it was before the internet and everything. So now I have all the rights to CreeD, and I absolutely want to make this available to as many people as possible. So, if you like my work now, it'd be really interesting for you to see, I'm sure, where the progression over the years of where I started. And that's what CreeD is. And it's a story about and a story by teenager. I started it when I was a kid, and all through my 20s I was doing this stuff. So, which is, I think, most of the people who, a good portion of the people who listen to my channel. So, it might be interesting to you. I don't know. It's also from a different time, so things are very different. I was a bit of a dork. I guess I still am. Can't really escape that. But hey, maybe, just perhaps, you'll find it relatable. Not sure. I don't know. I don't know what makes something relatable anymore. I don't know. But the nice thing about it is that you get to see all the pages from when I was a teenage kid. I was 14 or 15 years old when I was drawing the pages that you're seeing. And I would get my pages taken from me in class because the teachers would say that I wasn't paying attention, which I wasn't because I was drawing my comic book, which everybody thought was, all the grown-ups thought was kind of dumb, and all of my friends thought was really cool. So, my friends would ask me to design tattoos for them and all that stuff, and I'd try to put together stories that, uh, weren't really particularly great stories, but Creed was actually really kind of a cool, inspiring kind of a story for a lot of people. And it was the story of a kid who's in high school and he's not very popular, but he's able to traverse into another dimension, a dream world, where he's incredibly powerful. And so in that world, there's a great conflict, the Skeezix. And he meets up with CJ, who is a morphing frog that turns into a dragon. And all of this sounds crazy when I describe it like this now, all these years later. But, it's still a sort of a fun adventure into a very fantastic realm. And what's interesting is that a lot of the stories end up kind of where the dream world elements are invading into the real world for the character, and it's as if his fantasies are colliding with his realities. And I wonder if on some subconscious level, maybe that was kind of what was happening for me, um, you know, uh, somewhat autobiographically. If, is that the proper word? But basically, where this character who imagined another world, which was kind of like me drawing a comic book, um, did the comic book itself impact his own subconscious and impact his own real world in such a fashion that it changed it so that he eventually, slowly over time, becomes more empowered in the real world. I don't know, but I'm going to run with that. Actually, there was an overarching kind of a thing that happened over the course of, I think it was in print for about 16 years, although somewhat sporadically. So what had happened was I had started out with book one and later called it the Heaven Seed, which was sort of this locket that he had found. And then book two came out through Hall of Heroes, which was an independent little comic book publisher that my friends and I were making. And then I got picked up by Lightning Comics. Creed got picked up by Lightning Comics to do an 8 issue run. And there were spin-offs and guest appearances. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles appeared in Creed, although that is not in this collection, unfortunately, because I don't have the rights to them. That's sort of like the lost issue. Though there's two lost issues. There's also the crossover with Cyberfrog, with my friend, longtime friend Ethan Van Sciver, who we kind of got our start together in comics. And so what had happened was during that 2 year period of time with the 8 issues coming out from Lightning Comics, I worked with several different inkers, Cabin Boy and Jeff Lauder. I worked with some really fantastic colorists. Unfortunately, I had to pull some of the color from these books, and it's complicated as to why, but I also think it looks really good in black and white, and it reads a little bit more fluid. I never really liked super bright uh, uh, color contrasting colors in comic book panels. On covers, it's fantastic, but in storytelling, I much more prefer black and white, which is why I do Twilight Monk in black and white. And then, so getting back to the story, so during those 2 years, I was contracted to do 8 issues with Lightning Comics. In that time, we ran several issue number ones, and that became very confusing. And the reason was because as a publisher, they wanted to make profit from their book, and number ones sold twice as much as number twos and number threes. So they didn't have a long-term investment in Creed, so they just kind of kept pushing to release new number ones. And I was like, yeah, but wait a minute, this is like my brand. I want to make, someday I want to be up to Creed number 100. And they were like, yeah, but you're not going to be making very much at that time. And it was in hindsight, I understand their business side or their business perspective, but it confused the heck out of my readers, out of the readers of Creed, and it became very difficult to tell a good story if you're always starting over. So, um, one, I got to learn a lot from the experience as a young man. I got to learn a lot. We licensed CreeD out during that time to Chrome Productions, which was a card company. So there was a card collection. There was Bolt Toys licensed the property to be made into toys, action figures, and they were not posable, but you can find them on Amazon or eBay or wherever. And we had an animation licensing deal with Matinee Entertainment, and we were in talks with Disney actually at one point. But unfortunately, what happens with some of those situations is that they license something, and if they decide not to do it or they can't make it happen, they just pay a little fee, and then it never gets made. And unfortunately, by that time, the popularity of CreeD had died off dramatically. It's interesting to talk about sales figures of comic books now because we are living in a digital age where there are web comics and things like that. In contrast, way more people have seen my new comic, Twilight Monk, than have ever seen CreeD. CreeD at its peak was selling about 30,000 copies, which was amazing in 1995. But actually, by today's standards, if you're selling 25 to 30,000 copies, physical copies of something, that's really amazing too. You're going to be doing pretty good. Most comic books, I think, these days through Image only sell about 7 to 15,000 copies if they're lucky, unless if you're The Walking Dead, then you're selling 10 bazillion. Numbers that nobody's ever even heard of. And that's if you get a TV show or an animation deal. If you want to make comics, get a movie first. It's the best way to sell comics. It's as simple as that. So after Lightning, I started on Use Your Delusion, which was a sort of another reboot, but I wanted this to be the new standard. I really pushed myself in terms of the art. This was after the crossovers and the licensing deals, and it wasn't really sure if I was going to be able to keep doing CreeD, but so I started taking contract work with fashion companies like Jenko, designing raver clothes and things like that on the side. But I was still drawing CreeD about maybe a page every 2 days because it's a lot of work, and yeah, I ended up taking it to Avatar Press, who I felt really did not handle it in the way that I would have preferred. I kind of hoped that they would sort of reinvigorate some new life into what CreeD was, and unfortunately, I don't think that the owner of Avatar, the editor-in-chief, was on the same page with me because there was very little mention of the series in their lineup. They were doing a lot of, I think it was a poor choice simply because their lineup of the rest of the kind of comics that they published was not on the same page. They were doing a lot more adult themed content, and CreeD was just like a fun fantasy romp for people of all ages. It wasn't intended to be super serious. I tried to make it a little bit more serious by making the character like covered in leather and kind of giving him a little bit more of a serious undertone in the story. He gets poisoned and corrupted, and he's dealing with more serious issues in his real life. But ultimately, it wasn't a good fit. So after the 2-issue contract, I bailed, I left, and went and worked in fashion design. Moved to Los Angeles. Worked at Jenko Jeans, making comic books, developing new IPs for animated shows that never got made. And after my 11 to 12-hour work days, I'd come home and I'd go to bars and cafes and Hollywood, and I'd draw CreeD and write CreeD issues. And that's kind of what you're seeing right now in front of you. Mechanical Evolution was really about the character kind of having to face more structure in his life, and really being in denial of that. I got to create a lot of new characters, and I began to realize that my favorite part about designing stuff for CreeD at this time was designing the world, designing new places, exciting new characters, and developing interesting plot twists between characters. And so that's what I decided to pursue. And it ultimately led to me working as a concept artist in video games. So everything after Mechanical Evolution was pretty much just me pursuing concept art as a career path. I went and almost immediately started working on Game Boy Advance games during this time. My very first video game that I ever worked on was He-Man. I painted rocks in a He-Man game on the Game Boy Advance. And then if you want to play the creme de la crop of games that I worked on, Terminator 3 on the Game Boy Advance, I painted all of the tiles and did all the animations for that. And so fun times, but I'm being a little bit sarcastic. I don't think it was my best work, but it was a fun experience. Years later, I started to work on a story called Apple Tree, which came to me in a dream, a story about a young boy who was chased, lived in a shack full of junk, and he was chased by shadows. And so he ran off into the woods where he found another world, a doorway to another world. I think that when I was younger, I kind of had this perception that that my upbringing in some way was dis I guess just dysfunctional, and so that sort of mirrored in the character. So he had a I didn't, I'm a child of divorce, so I've got that. I can always use that as an excuse for just about any bad behavior that I do in life. And when I was a kid, my parents couldn't make it work, and so I think that I blamed myself a lot, and so there was a lot of like guilt and things like that, and a lot of that surfaced in my writings as a teenager. I still spent time with my dad. It was, every other weekend kind of a thing. I guess this is kind of digging into some personal stuff, but that's what CreeD was. It was a personal story that, and it was interesting because the more I would write about it and the more I kind of showed this sort of vulnerability and the kind of honesty about the way I felt about family, about people, about the way that the character felt that he couldn't connect with anybody. It sort of mirrored my own experiences, and in a lot of ways, I think it ended up kind of helping me to make a lot of friends and connect more with people, which is very valuable for somebody going through that, feeling completely ostracized and completely feeling guilty that so much of what had happened was their own fault, as I did, as a kid. And so the character of Mark Farley, the character of CreeD, he would. I think that he created that dream world because he he needed to escape, and I created comic books because I needed to escape. And oh man, so heavy. That's some heavy stuff. I think that I don't know if I could even write CreeD anymore. It was it was an interesting stage in my life to see things somewhat just as this destructive ball of chaos, to perceive the world that way. But if you listen to my channel and you read Twilight Monk, or if you know me, you'll know that I'm actually not like that anymore at all. My life is quite incredible now, and I think that a lot of that was because of that healing process that I went through in making CreeD. I'm forever grateful for the experiences and the challenges that I went through, all of the good and all of the bad, all of the I regret some of the mean things that I did to other people, of course, but the experience of making this series over all that many years, and to do something so personal, and to have people accept it and enjoy it the way that they did, really really cool. Really kind of brought me a connection to others that in a way that I don't know that anything else could have. And it kind of helped me to shape that I would become an artist and that I would become a writer. Um, through having gone through that. And it's hard to see that when you're in it. It's hard to see that when you're going through it, and it's like, wow, I'm only a quarter of the way through the journey, or I'm just getting started on this journey of fixing some of my own issues and things like that. And then to come out the other side and look back in hindsight and go, wow, like it was all worth it. All the mistakes, all the struggles, all the challenges, the challenges with ego, the challenges with other people's egos. Um, you know, it's kind of neat to have that in the past. Anyway, so what's awesome, the coolest features about this collection are that I've actually compiled all of the covers, some of them colored by, some of my good friends from my past, Jamie Hood, Aaron Ricks. There's just been, I've had the fortune of working with some very talented people, and I was able to collect all of those covers, and I think that I even went so far as to get all the really rare covers. So if you did buy like maybe one or two of the CreeD books back in the day, but maybe it was hard to find all the variants and all that stuff. I mean, some people really got into it and they actually collected all these and they tracked them down. Oh man, that was a Tim Townsend. Did the inking on that one. Anyway, yeah, some of these covers are super rare. Some of them were never released. Some of them are just straight up from my flat file that I found and I scanned in, and I put all the graphic design together for this. And it was actually published and released by IDW as a physical copy. If you really want to get a physical copy of this book, it's a massive, heavy book, but you can find that on Amazon. But if you want the digital version, yeah, swing on over to that link and pick it up. I think it's like $9 or $10, for the ebook, which I think is a good price, considering just how much stuff is in here and how much work actually, I put into it. I actually didn't get any help with the lettering on any of it. Towards the end, there was a lot of scenes that I had to relettered entire issues, did edits and corrections, and it was quite an ordeal. Also putting together these sketch pages, the collections of sketches. Some of these were the original sketches from the character design that I did back in high school. There's like some bad poetry, but if you're reading the book, you'll get why. It actually fits in very well with the mood of the series, and there were some projected story arcs of unfinished stories that I would have liked to have done that I just never got a chance to. And who knows? Maybe I don't know if there will ever be another CreeD book, but if there ever is, I know that I've got a good pile of stories that I'd like to do. I just don't know. I think it wouldn't be as serious. I think it would be a little bit more playful. I think that's where Twilight Monk is very, very different. Twilight Monk is a lot of fun kung fu martial arts. It's just everything that I love to draw, and it was born out of an exuberance and an enthusiasm for life and creativity and creative expression. And I think that CreeD was born out of a place of lonely desperation, and I think that's the big difference. But anyway, there you have it. That's the really quick preview. If you if you didn't want to actually go and buy the PDF or the ebook for it, you could probably just freeze frame it every page and read through it here. But certainly, your support is appreciated, and it could lead to a lot more books. As it stands, I'm somewhat reluctant to do any comic book stuff because it seems like I'm just better at doing other things these days. But if you really like my work and you want to see more of some of my past projects, if you'd like this video, actually, let me know. There's other books that I had done and other projects that I had worked on in the past. I'd love to do a commentary for some of my previous projects. It would be really interesting to do playthroughs of some of my old video games that I worked on, such as Diablo or even Final Fight Streetwise. Although it might be confusing because I also voiced the main character for that game. So, when I talk, I'd have to muffle him out or change the pitch or something. I don't know, so it doesn't sound the same. Although it's a little bit more gruff. I can't even do the voice anymore. Anyway, I need more booze if I'm going to do that. Anyways, thank you so much for checking out this preview for the CreeD Collected Edition, the Omnichronos. Yeah, go check that out, and please subscribe and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you. Bye.